Next up, I'm going to provide my initial thoughts and plans for the GHL Mitras. Well, as many of you know, I have never ever used LEDs over any of my SPS dominated reef tanks. I've had great success with metal halides and supplemental T5s, and as a result have stuck with what works. So I'm both a little nervous but also very excited to try something different. The knock against halides is that they add heat to an aquarium and make it tougher to keep cool during the summer months. My tanks here in Vermont are kept in a relatively cool finished basement, so the chiller on my 187-gallon tank does not turn on too often. However, I do have a fan over the frag system plumbed into my display, and that fan is typically on in the summer. With that said, less heat was one reason I leaned towards LEDs for this new tank build. Another plus for LEDs is that you do not have to spend money to change out bulbs like you do with halides and T5s. That appealed to me. What about the electricity bill? Often I hear folks say that they save money on electricity by using LEDs, but I'm not sure that will really be true for me since I will be using 6 GHL Mitras, which can each use up to 195 watts of electricity. The 1,170 watts from those fixtures would nearly be the same as the wattage from 3 400-watt metal halide bulbs, although that does not include any T5s. Now let's focus on the Mitras. The first thing I noticed is the excellent build quality. These German engineered lights are solid, high-end pieces of equipment similar to the other GHL products I have. I do believe quality equates to longevity, and that is important since you can save money over the long run. What about the light spread? For this model of Mitras, the LX7206, you can expect to get 30 inches of coverage on the sides and 28 inches of coverage front to back. Given that my tank is 36 inches wide, I went with 6 fixtures, 2 rows of 3, to make sure I had complete coverage on the sides of the tank. On a purely observational basis, the coverage of my lights seems to be excellent. There is no shading in the tank, and I do like the fact that there is no disco effect, a criticism I've heard about LEDs. In terms of PAR, these lights performed really well. During my initial tests, I was seeing PAR values that ranged from 400 at the lower part of the tank to 500 near the top of the rock. And some of the higher values were registered in between the fixtures, a testament to the great light spreading coverage I was getting with the lights. Interestingly, the PAR values generated by the Mitras were actually much higher versus the readings of 200 to 300 I was getting under my halides and T5s. As a result, I did crank down the intensity on the Mitras to lower PAR to the 300 to 400 range to avoid stressing out any frags I wanted to add in the future for my 187-gallon tank. Okay, now on to the spectrum. Another advantage I didn't mention about LEDs is that you can totally customize the spectrum in addition to the power output. That is great, but it can also be problematic if a lot of changes are made since SPS likes stability. My goal with these LEDs is to find a satisfactory spectrum and then stick with it. I do hear about folks making changes and tweaks to LEDs to chase colors of certain corals, so I'm really going to try to avoid that. Man, halides and T5s are so easy since they are plug and play. This is a whole different ball game and world with LEDs. That's tough for an old school reefer like me. Aesthetically, I'm not a big fan of a lot of blue light. I see it a lot with LEDs, and I know it brings out the fluorescence in corals. With my halides and T5s, I'm used to seeing corals under crisp white light with a hint of blue. So it was sort of a shock when I started to run some blue-dominated spectrums with the Mitras. Could I live with this? Man, it was quite the contrast when I panned away from the new tank and looked at my old tank with the halides and T5s. But after a while, I sort of got used to the bluer spectrum and thought it would be cool to have a different look with the new tank. Given my success with the 400 watt 20K radiums, I thought it would be a great idea to try and replicate that spectrum with these Mitras. A fellow reefer known as Telegram on Instagram and YouTube is a Mitras user and also has data he captured on 250 watt 20K radium bulbs and 400 watt 20K Hamilton bulbs. I reached out to him to see if he could replicate a Mitras spectrum based on those bulbs. Here is the Mitras spectrum he created. The ghosted spectrum behind it is for the Hamilton 20K bulb with an electronic ballast. Note that the spectrum for the 400 watt 20K Hamilton bulb is nearly identical to the one for the 250 watt 20K radium bulb. It is also interesting to note that the spectrum of the 400 watt 20K Hamilton bulb is very similar to the Ecotech Radion's AB Plus spectrum, a popular spectrum used by SPS enthusiasts. The ghost is for the 400 watt Hamiltons. So in essence, this Mitras light profile created by Telegram is a replication of the Radion AB Plus spectrum that covers the spectrum you would expect to see from a 400 watt 20K Hamilton bulb and a 250 watt 20K radium bulb. Yes, the lights do look blue to me, but I really like the fact that they mirror the spectral output of the 20K radium bulbs. Hey, at least I can hold on to some part of my metal halide roots. Of course, it is all about results, and I am really looking forward to seeing how SPS do under this setup. Anyway, many thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. I will put links to Marine Depot and Reefbum in the video description below. See you next time.